Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gassabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life. Hello, and welcome back. I'm Kara, and today's episode is core wedding memory. I feel like I'm so bad at doing story time, and that's like the number one thing they tell you to do is like tell stories, and I need to like get better at it. But the other day I was thinking about my like favorite and one of my first memories of being at a wedding and just wanting to tell you guys that story because I think there's so much to be gleaned from it. I think I was in late high school maybe, and I was going to my cousin's wedding, and I was one of the only younger cousins invited. There's like 30 something of us, so I was really excited to go. It was kind of like a fancy wedding in a like upstate New York somewhere, Long Island maybe, actually, country club, like really old, like cool venue. And it just seemed like really exciting and fancy. And I was very into going, obviously, because I loved weddings. And I just remember my cousin that was getting married was the guy. And so the bride was sort of a new figure, a new person that was coming into our family. And so I was very obviously intrigued and paying attention and observing. And her mother had passed away. So that was like a big sort of, what would you call it? Just like thread through the day, right? Was that her mom wasn't there, right? We were missing the mother of the bride. And so just always remembering, just being very tuned in to like, oh, how does this go? How does this feel? Does she have the support and the help she needs? Because I had always heard about how important the mother of the bride is on a wedding day. Luckily, she had an older sister who really was filling that role and was, making the fuss and making sure that everything was okay and handling all of the little glitchy things that were going on. And I remember that one of the little dramas that was unfolding, as they do, was that the baker of the wedding cake had had a death in their family. I know you can't like make this stuff up, but like, spoiler alert, life still happens even when it's someone's wedding. So I guess the baker had a huge loss, unexpected loss in their family. And so the wedding cake was done, but it wasn't like fully decorated. I guess there was more that was supposed to happen. You had the 3 tiers and a little bit of like trim and stuff, but I guess there was a lot more that was supposed to be happening that didn't happen. I think a lot of like flowers and stuff. And so I remember sort of just like kind of being around and sort of watching this older sister of the bride trying to like troubleshoot. First of all, talking a lot about like, oh my gosh, this baker. So we have like this vendor who has like failed to provide the service that they had promised. And like, how do we feel about that? And what are we going to do about that? But like also sounds like the circumstances were really dramatic. And so just watching sort of the women come together. Okay, what are we going to do about it? And we've got this cake, but it's not quite right. And we're all very upset and stressed about it because, again, what do we do around these big occasions but dump our stress into like these smaller details? And so I just remember just watching this and witnessing this and thinking also like, that sucks. Like this is her one wedding day and this cake is like not right, and just what all of that means and what goes on. And so ending up helping them get some like flowers from the florist, sort of like make this work. And it was just funny watching the older sister, I think, in all of her excitement, but also all of her stress and sort of overwhelm and just kind of overdoing it. So I remember her just like putting flowers on the top and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks good. And then like adding more to the side. And then the whole thing starts to look a bit like a botanical experiment and like a wild garden frosted situation. So again, very sweet, but like one of those times where maybe less would have been more, and they went with the more is more approach out of that just feeling of anxiety taking over that often leads us to sort of overwork things. Anyway, that's what was happening. But I'm thinking like, it's so nice that she's trying to help. And so I remember, the reception goes on. I don't even know if this was like watching this happen was before the ceremony or after what. But anyway, fast forward, the ceremony goes well. Everything's great. Everybody seems happy. The bride seems happy. And then there was the time that this wedding cake was on a like push cart, like a little trolley thing. And I remember, being a little nervous. The whole point, I think, was to not let the bride really see the cake earlier on in the reception because like it might cause distress. So they were kind of like keeping it a bit out of view, and then they would just bring it out for the cake cutting when it was like kind of too late to like react or whatever. So I remember the older sisters specifically wheeling out this wedding cake, and as she's like moving it from sort of the side room into like the ballroom, the little lip of like the doorway, and they have like the little hump in the doorway. What's it called? I don't know, little transition piece, like little wood trim. She pushes the cart, and she's already filled with a lot of emotion. And so she pushes this cart, and she pushes it like too hard. The wedding cake starts like falling over. Somebody, probably one of the catering staff, like is on the other side and like has to like push it, kind of catch it / push it to get it back on the stand. It was like everybody's like watching like, oh my, like for those of us who know are already like, oh my gosh, here comes this like ugly cake. And now this woman is like all like bent out of shape about it. She's trying to make it okay. She's really on another level. She's pushing it, and now it's like falling. It's like the wedding cake disaster that like couldn't get worse is now like worse. And I just remember looking over at the bride thinking like, what happened? Like, this is so bad. Like, what happens now? And how she just laughed. Right? She just laughed, and she just walked over, and she just gave her sister this big hug, and the sister's trying to explain, and she's kind of like, I don't even care, and it's so beautiful, and I'm so happy, and let's cut this crazy cake, and let's just like do the whole thing. And she just didn't fall into like this tragic narrative that like the rest of us had about this cake, even though like she had every right to be the most upset about it. It was just so cool to see. And I will just never forget, right? This is like the core memory for me was like, the takeaway wasn't this like cake disaster. The takeaway memory was like, who was the bride in that moment? When things really did go wrong, it was her reaction that like set the tone for the entire room, that made the memory for me, and why I try so hard to work with my brides and remind them that like, it's not really what happens on your wedding day. It's who you are. It's how you show up. It's the energy you bring into the room. It's the narrative you write about what happens at your wedding and in your life. And so this is just one of those like moments for me that just crystallized and just captured everything, like how important it is to be like emotionally just really in the game, to be really present and to be really grounded and to have your priorities just completely where you want them to be, so that a situation like this, not only do you not like sweat it, you don't let it derail your whole day, you don't let it spiral, you don't let it ruin things, but you can like transmute it into something really beautiful and healing and funny and just memorable. And I just love that story. I will never forget that bride, that reaction, that cake, that sister, and the underlying subplots of like a baker with a tragic death and with the mother of the bride who's just not even there, and all the grief that goes on, and how it all can just be happening while you're trying to have the best day of your life. And it's just so much. And it just really, really reminds me of why I do this work and the things that we're up against when we are planning a wedding, when we're attending a wedding. And also just to remind you, if you are planning a wedding and you're trying to get all the details right, no matter what, the most critical thing to get right is your energy. It's your reaction. It's how you show up. It's your spirit. That's what people will remember. That's the vibe that they will cherish, is how you handled yourself and how you led the day with your beauty and your grace and your elegance and your humor and your ability to roll with it. It's just, that's the key. And that can take some work, right? A little bit of emotional work to get yourself to that point where you have that ability to put space between yourself and an unsavory circumstance, when you have that ability to rewrite your narrative on the fly, when you can pivot, when you can just guard your joy and your peace against all odds and intrusions. That is a skill that you can build, and I can help you do it. So reach out for your bridal session. It is like just a magical, exciting, luxurious thing that you can do as you prep for your wedding. Book with me on karamorning.com. And in the meantime, reach out on Instagram and TikTok, Kara the Bridal Coach. I love hearing from you guys. And until next time, I am wishing you nothing but bridal bliss.